The supply officer smiled politely as the lieutenant questioned her presence on the tarmac. Nobody realized the quiet woman tracking manifests had once been the Army's most lethal designated marksman. Captain Elena Vasquez stood at the edge of the airfield at Forward Operating Base Sentinel, clipboard in hand, watching C-130 cargo planes taxi across the shimmering Afghan runway. She'd held this logistics position for 22 months, managing supply chains and cargo manifests for the 75th Ranger Regiment stationed at this remote outpost. The soldiers called her Manifest with casual respect, appreciating her efficiency but never suspecting the secrets buried beneath her calm professionalism. She wore the same desert camouflage as everyone else, but her role kept her behind desks and cargo pallets, rather than on patrol. What the Rangers didn't know, what nobody at FOB Sentinel knew, was that before Elena became a supply officer, she had been Staff Sergeant Vasquez, 3rd Infantry Division designated marksman with 63 confirmed kills across 2 combat deployments. She'd been exceptional, the kind of shooter that instructors used as the benchmark for excellence. But that life had ended 4 years ago during a night operation in Kandahar when her spotter, Corporal Jamie Reeves, had died in her arms from wounds Elena couldn't prevent. She'd made 2 promises at Jamie's grave: serve her country and never take another life. The transition from combat arms to logistics had been deliberate, almost therapeutic. Elena had retrained, buried her marksmanship medals in a storage unit back in Colorado, and requested the most administrative position the Army would give someone with her experience. FOB Sentinel became her sanctuary, a place where she managed inventory instead of taking lives, where her hands signed requisition forms instead of squeezing triggers. The Rangers she served, Bravo Company, 48 elite soldiers led by Captain James Rucker, treated her with professional courtesy, never knowing she'd once operated at their level and chosen to walk away from it. But today felt different. Elena noticed it in the radio chatter, the way Lieutenant Marcus Webb kept scanning the northern ridge line during the morning briefing, the unusual tension in Captain Rucker's voice when he'd outlined the day's patrol route. Intelligence had reported increased Taliban activity in the valley, concentrated movement suggesting something larger than the usual harassment. The patrol would take 20 Rangers into disputed territory to investigate a suspected weapons cache. As she watched them load into vehicles at 900 hours, Elena felt the old tactical awareness stirring, the pattern recognition that had kept her alive through 37 firefights, whispering that something was wrong. Elena returned to her office in the logistics compound, a prefabricated structure filled with filing cabinets and computer terminals tracking every bullet, bandage, and MRE that moved through FOB Sentinel. Specialist Danny Park, her assistant, was organizing delivery schedules for the next supply convoy. She tried to focus on the fuel consumption reports, but her attention kept drifting to the radio mounted on the wall, currently silent except for routine check-ins. The patrol had been gone 2 hours. They should be approaching the target location soon, the abandoned village where intelligence suggested the weapons cache was hidden. At 11:47 hours, the radio exploded with gunfire and shouting. "Contact! Contact! We've got multiple hostiles! Heavy fire from the ridgeline! This is Bravo 2-1! We're pinned down in the village square!" Lieutenant Webb's voice cracked with urgency, professional training barely containing the panic underneath. Elena was on her feet instantly, every instinct from her previous life snapping into focus. Park stared at her, confused by the sudden transformation in his normally placid supervisor. She moved to the radio, listening as the situation reports came in fragments, painting a picture of disaster unfolding in real time. The Taliban had set a trap. Intelligence had been deliberately leaked to draw Rangers into the village, where 30 or more insurgents occupied fortified positions on the high ground. Bravo Company was caught in a kill box, vehicles disabled by RPG fire, casualties mounting. Captain Rucker's voice came through, steady but grim. "We need immediate air support and QRF. We've got 4 critical wounded, can't establish defensive perimeter. They're closing in from 3 sides." Elena's hands clenched the edge of the desk. The quick reaction force would take 20 minutes to mobilize and reach the village. The patrol didn't have 20 minutes. The Tactical Operations Center erupted into controlled chaos as FOB Sentinel's command staff coordinated response. Elena moved through the compound toward the TOC, drawn by something deeper than curiosity. Through the open door, she could see Colonel Sarah Morrison directing operations, officers shouting coordinates into radios, someone trying to raise Apache gunships that were already committed to another engagement 30 kilometers away. The digital map showed Bravo Company's position, a small cluster of blue icons surrounded by estimated enemy positions marked in red. It was a meat grinder, and the Rangers were being fed into it 1 casualty at a time. Elena stood in the doorway, watching the seconds tick away. watching good soldiers die because help was too far away. She saw Lieutenant Chen arguing about drone coverage, Sergeant Major Rodriguez coordinating the QRF loadout, everyone doing their jobs with professional competence that wouldn't be enough. Then Colonel Morrison's voice cut through the noise. Can we get a sniper team to that western ridge? If someone could suppress those enemy positions, give Bravo time to consolidate. Captain Hayes shook his head. Our designated marksman deployed with the patrol, ma'am. We don't have anyone qualified. Elena's jaw tightened. She closed her eyes, seeing Jamie's face, hearing her own promise. Then she stepped forward into the operations center. Ma'am, I can make that shot. Elena's voice was quiet but carried across the operations center like a blade cutting through fog. Every head turned toward her. Colonel Morrison's eyes narrowed with confusion and irritation at the interruption from a logistics officer. Captain Vasquez, this isn't the time for... Elena stepped closer to the map, her finger tracing the terrain. Western Ridge, 800 meters from the village square, clear line of sight to their high ground positions. I can suppress those shooters, give Bravo time to extract their wounded and establish defense, but I need transport there now. Captain Hayes actually laughed, a sharp bark of disbelief. You're a supply officer. You think you can... Elena turned to face him, and something in her eyes made him stop mid-sentence. 4 years ago, I was Staff Sergeant Elena Vasquez, 3rd Infantry Division, designated marksman, 63 confirmed kills, longest successful engagement 940 meters. I qualified expert on the M110 SAS and held the division record for accuracy under combat conditions. The operations center went silent except for the radio crackling with desperate situation reports from the dying patrol. Colonel Morrison stared at her, processing this impossible information. Why the hell is this not in your service record? Morrison demanded, already moving toward her computer terminal. Elena's voice remained steady, emotionless. It's there, ma'am. Page 6 of my file, previous assignments and qualifications. Most people only read the first page and see logistics officer. She watched the colonel pull up her file, scroll down, watched the moment disbelief transformed into possibility. Morrison looked up, her face hard with the calculus of command, weighing the lives of 20 rangers against the words of a supply officer claiming to be something more. If you're lying, if you're wrong about this, then 20 rangers die anyway, Elena interrupted. Same outcome as right now. But I'm not wrong, ma'am. I walked away from this life for good reasons, made promises I intended to keep. But those men deserve a chance. She pointed at the map where Bravo Company's icons were flickering, some already changing to casualty status red. Get me to that ridge with a rifle and ammunition. Give me 10 minutes of shooting. Just 10 minutes, and the QRF will arrive to living soldiers instead of corpses. The radio crackled again. Bravo 2-1, we've lost Hendricks. Jackson's bleeding out. We need help now. Colonel Morrison made her decision in 3 seconds. Sergeant Major Rodriguez, get Captain Vasquez a weapon. M110, full combat load, whatever she needs. Lieutenant Chen, coordinate with the QRF. 1 vehicle splits off, gets her to that western ridge by the fastest route possible. She locked eyes with Elena, the weight of command passing between them. You get 10 minutes of shooting, Captain. Make them count. Hayes, pull her service jacket. Verify her marksmanship scores. Elena was already moving toward the armory before Morrison finished speaking, feeling muscle memory 4 years dormant beginning to wake, knowing she was about to break her promise to Jamie for the right reasons. The armory was a climate-controlled vault where Staff Sergeant Miller maintained FOB Sentinel's weapons with obsessive precision. He stared at Elena like she'd grown a second head when Rodriguez barked orders to equip her for combat. The M110, full load, suppressor, rangefinder, the works. Now Miller. The staff sergeant moved with practiced efficiency, pulling the semi-automatic sniper rifle from its rack, but his hands shook slightly as he handed it to this supply officer he'd never seen hold anything more dangerous than a clipboard. Elena took the weapon, checked the action, and Miller's eyes widened at the professional smoothness of her movements. She stripped the rifle partially down in 15 seconds, inspecting the bolt, chamber, and gas system with the kind of intimacy that only came from thousands of hours of training. Last cleaning? She asked, already reassembling it. Miller stammered. 3 days ago, ma'am. Fired 200 rounds last week. 0 shift was .3 mils. Elena nodded, satisfied, slinging the weapon across her back. Rodriguez handed her a tactical vest already loaded with magazines, 140 rounds of 7.62mm ammunition, each bullet a precision-machined promise of death. She hadn't worn combat gear in 4 years, but her hands found every pouch and strap automatically, muscle memory overriding conscious thought. Outside, a Humvee idled with Corporal Jake Santos at the wheel, a young ranger who'd probably never driven faster than convoy speed. Elena climbed into the passenger seat while Rodriguez leaned through the window. Straight to Grid November Whiskey 47, Western Ridge overlooking the village. Drive like hell, son. The QRF is 5 minutes behind you. Santos looked at Elena, this logistics officer now bristling with weapons, and swallowed hard. Ma'am, are you really going to— She cut him off. Drive, Corporal. Talk later. The Humvee lurched forward, tires spitting gravel as Santos accelerated toward the base gate and the hostile territory beyond. The road was barely more than a goat trail cutting through rocky terrain, and Santos took it at 60 kilometers per hour, the Humvee bouncing violently over ruts and stones. Elena braced herself against the doorframe, using the time to prepare mentally for what came next. She hadn't fired a weapon in anger since the night Jamie died, hadn't allowed herself to even think about the specific calculations and breathing patterns that made her exceptional, but now those skills emerged from wherever she'd buried them, unfurling like a dark flower in her consciousness. Wind speed, air temperature, distance, elevation, the variables began organizing themselves automatically in her mind. Through the windshield, she could see smoke rising from the village 3 kilometers ahead, the chatter of automatic weapons fire audible even over the engine roar. The radio clipped to her vest crackled with continuous updates from the patrol. Another ranger down, ammunition running low, enemy forces pressing closer. Captain Rucker's voice had gone flat, the tonelessness that came when commanders accepted they were about to die but kept fighting anyway. Santos looked at her, fear and hope mixing on his young face. Can you really do this, ma'am? Elena checked her rifle one final time, chambering around. In about 3 minutes, Corporal, you're going to find out exactly what I used to be. Eleanor's finger found the trigger with the familiar weight of memory and responsibility. The enemy shooter on the northern ridge was adjusting his RPG, preparing to fire at the pinned rangers below. Range, 823 meters. Wind correction, 0.7 mils right. Elevation, down 3 clicks. She exhaled slowly, her heart rate dropping below 50 beats per minute, and squeezed. The suppressed rifle coughed, almost gentle, and through the scope she watched the RPG operator collapse backward, his weapon tumbling down the rocky slope. The other insurgents didn't even know they were under fire yet. Elena worked the bolt, chambered another round, and found her next target. For the next 8 minutes, Eleanor Brooks became something she'd sworn she would never be again. The instrument of precise, calculated death. Her hands moved with mechanical efficiency, working bolt and trigger in rhythm that was almost meditative. Target, breathe, squeeze, confirm, next target. Each shot was a mathematics problem, solved in blood. Each solution bought the Rangers below another few seconds of survival. The insurgents on the ridge began to realize they were being hunted, but couldn't identify the source. Suppressed fire from an unexpected angle, eliminating their shooters one by one while they frantically searched for a threat they couldn't locate. Below in the village, Captain Rucker's voice came through her radio, confusion mixing with cautious hope. Bravo 2-1, enemy fire is decreasing, multiple hostile contacts down on the north ridge. Unknown friendly providing support. Elena didn't respond, focused entirely on her scope, tracking a machine gunner who was trying to relocate his position. She led him by 2 body widths, accounting for his movement and the wind, and fired. The machine gun went silent, 17 shots fired, 14 confirmed kills, 3 more wounded, and out of the fight. The Taliban force that had been systematically destroying Bravo Company was suddenly fighting for survival against an invisible enemy who killed with surgical precision from impossible distances. The radio traffic from the village changed character as the Rangers realized they had unexpected support. Corporal Marcus Chen's voice came through, younger and steadier now that death wasn't quite so imminent. Unknown friendly, if you can hear this, you just saved our asses. Enemy is withdrawing from North Ridge. We're consolidating position and treating wounded. Elena allowed herself a tight smile, but her scope never stopped moving, searching for remaining threats. 4 Taliban fighters were dragging wounded comrades away through the ravine, no longer engaging. She let them go. Her job wasn't revenge. It was giving these Rangers the time they needed to survive until the QRF arrived. Then she saw the problem that nobody else could see from their positions. 2 enemy fighters had broken away from the main withdrawal, circling wide through a dried creek bed that would bring them around to the Rangers' blind side in approximately 90 seconds. They were moving tactically, using terrain, clearly more experienced than the average Taliban fighter. One carried what looked like a suicide vest, the other a belt-fed PKM machine gun. These weren't retreating, they were repositioning for a final devastating attack. Elena's training calculated the geometry instantly. 960 meters, moving targets, partial concealment, 45 seconds to prevent catastrophe. She adjusted her breathing, led the first target by 3 body lengths to account for his movement through the creek bed, and fired. The suppressed shot was lost in the ambient noise of the firefight, but through her scope she watched the machine gunner stumble and fall, his weapon splashing into the shallow water. The second fighter with the suicide vest realized his partner was down, began moving faster, abandoning tactical discipline for desperate speed. Elena tracked him smoothly, compensated for his acceleration, and fired again. He dropped 12 meters from the ranger's blindside perimeter, close enough that Corporal Chen would later report hearing the body hit the ground without understanding what had almost happened. The QRF Humvees appeared on the eastern ridge at 12:01 hours, 14 minutes after the ambush began, carrying 20 fresh Rangers and enough firepower to turn the tide definitively. The remaining Taliban fighters scattered into the mountains, their coordinated assault shattered by an invisible shooter they never identified. Elena chambered her last round, swept the ridgeline one final time, then carefully safed her weapon. 23 shots fired, 19 confirmed enemy casualties. 4 Rangers alive, who would have died in the next 60 seconds without her intervention. She stood slowly from her shooting position, joints stiff from the intense focus, and looked at Corporal Santos, who'd watched the entire engagement with his jaw hanging open. "Jesus Christ, ma'am," Santos whispered, his voice shaking. "I watched you. Those were people." Elena met his eyes, her face carved from stone. "Those were enemy combatants trying to kill American soldiers, Corporal. And yes, they were people. So are the Rangers down there who get to go home to their families now instead of in body bags." She could see him struggling with what he'd witnessed, the clinical efficiency of killing reduced to its mathematical essence. This was why she'd walked away, why she'd promised Jamie never again, because once you became good at death, really good, there was no pretending it was noble or heroic, it was just necessary. The ride back to FOB Sentinel was silent, except for the radio traffic coordinating medical evacuation for the wounded Rangers. 3 critical, 5 serious, 12 minor injuries, but all 20 would survive to receive treatment. The patrol that should have been annihilated was limping home intact, because a logistics officer had stepped forward when no one else could. Santos kept glancing at her, this woman who'd transformed from mild-mannered supply captain into something out of a special operations legend. Elena stared straight ahead, feeling the familiar emptiness that always followed combat, the hollow place where adrenaline used to live before experience taught her that survival wasn't a victory, just a postponement. Colonel Morrison was waiting at the gate when they arrived, along with what looked like half the base command staff. Elena climbed out of the Humvee, still carrying the M110, and walked directly to the armory to return the weapon to Staff Sergeant Miller. But Morrison intercepted her, face unreadable. "Captain Vasquez, my office now." The tone suggested this wasn't a request. Elena followed her across the compound, aware of dozens of eyes tracking their movement, aware that word had already spread through the rumor mill faster than official channels. The supply officer who turned into a sniper, the quiet woman from logistics who saved Bravo Company with impossible shots from an impossible distance. Morrison's office was Spartan: desk, computer, filing cabinets, and a wall of commendations from 15 years of service. The colonel closed the door, then turned to face Elena with an expression mixing respect, confusion, and something that might have been anger. "Captain Hayes confirmed your service record. Division marksman, 63 confirmed kills, multiple commendations for valor. So my question is simple. Why the hell has one of the most skilled combat shooters in the army been filing supply requisitions for the past 4 years? Elena stood at attention, voice neutral. "Because I requested reassignment to logistics, ma'am. I didn't want to shoot people anymore." Morrison studied her for a long moment. "You didn't want to shoot people anymore, but you just eliminated 19 enemy combatants in 8 minutes. Most efficient single-shooter engagement I've seen in my entire career." Elena's jaw tightened. "The Rangers needed help. I was the only person on this base who could provide it. That doesn't mean I'm returning to that role permanently, ma'am. I did what was necessary, nothing more." The colonel sat on the edge of her desk, her professional facade cracking slightly to reveal genuine curiosity. "What happened 4 years ago, Captain? What made you walk away from something you were clearly exceptional at?" Elena's hands clenched at her sides, the only visible sign of emotion breaking through her controlled exterior. "My spotter died, ma'am. Staff Sergeant Jamie Chen. We were providing overwatch for a convoy extraction outside Kandahar. Night operation. Everything went wrong. Jamie took shrapnel from an RPG while calling corrections for my shots. Bled out in my arms while I was still engaging targets, because if I stopped shooting, the entire convoy would have been overrun. So I kept firing, kept killing, while my best friend died next to me, asking me to tell his daughter he loved her." Morrison's expression softened, understanding dawning. After the mission, they gave me a Bronze Star for saving the convoy, 32 confirmed kills in one engagement, successful extraction of all personnel except Jamie. Elena's voice remained flat, emotionless, but her eyes carried 4 years of accumulated pain. I looked at that medal and realized I'd become so good at killing that I could do it even while someone I loved was dying beside me, so efficient at death that nothing could distract me from the work, not even grief. That's when I knew I had to stop, ma'am, because I wasn't a soldier anymore. I was just a weapon that happened to be shaped like a person. Morrison was quiet for a moment, then stood and moved to her filing cabinet. Captain, I need to show you something. Radio intercepts we received 20 minutes ago. She pulled out a folder, handed it to Elena. Taliban communications after the engagement. They're calling you the ghost shooter, reporting that an American sniper eliminated their entire ambush team from an impossible position. They've put a bounty on you, $50,000 for information about the woman marksman. Elena stared at the translated intercepts, feeling ice spread through her chest. They know I'm a woman? Morrison nodded grimly. Someone talked, or they guessed from surveillance. Either way, you're compromised. The implications crystallized instantly in Elena's tactical mind. She'd revealed herself broken cover, and now enemy intelligence networks would be actively searching for information about the American woman who could shoot like a special operations soldier. Fob Sentinel suddenly felt smaller, more vulnerable. Morrison continued, voice careful. I can request immediate transfer back to the States, get you somewhere safe, or... She paused, weighing her words. The Rangers you saved want to meet you. Captain Rucker specifically requested to thank the shooter who gave his men a chance to survive. They're being treated in the medical facility right now, and every single one of them knows they should be dead. Elena looked at the folder, at the bounty on her head, at the walls of this office that represented 4 years of hiding from what she truly was. She thought about Jamie bleeding out while she worked the bolt on her rifle with mechanical precision, thought about the promise she'd made to never become that person again. Thought about 20 Rangers who would see their families because she'd broken that promise. I'll meet with Captain Rucker and his team, she said quietly. Then I need to make a phone call to Jamie's daughter. She's 14 now, old enough to understand why I did what I did today, why I became the thing her father died watching me be. The medical facility smelled of antiseptic and blood, a scent Elena knew too well from too many forward aid stations. Captain Rucker was sitting upright in a bed, despite the bandages wrapping his left shoulder and torso, his face gray with pain, but his eyes alert. When Elena entered, every ranger in the room who could stand did so, snapping to attention despite their injuries. Rucker saluted with his good arm, voice rough. Captain Vasquez, Bravo Company owes you our lives. My men and I wanted to thank you personally for the most remarkable display of marksmanship any of us have ever witnessed. Elena returned the salute, uncomfortable with the reverence in their faces. At ease, all of you. You're wounded. Sit down before you collapse. The Rangers reluctantly settled back into beds and chairs, but their eyes never left her. Corporal Marcus Chen spoke up, his leg wrapped in surgical dressing. Ma'am, we counted the shots afterward. 23 rounds fired, 19 confirmed kills. At ranges up to 960 meters, with wind-moving targets. That's not just skill, that's supernatural. Elena shook her head. That's 10,000 hours of training, Corporal. Mathematics, physics, and muscle memory. There's nothing supernatural about killing people efficiently. Her bluntness created an uncomfortable silence, but she refused to let them romanticize what she'd done. Rucker broke the tension, his command presence reasserting itself despite his injuries. Captain, we heard you haven't served in a combat role for 4 years, that you requested reassignment to logistics. Yet when we needed help, you stepped forward anyway. That takes a different kind of courage than pulling a trigger. Elena met his eyes, saw genuine understanding there. I lost my spotter 4 years ago in Kandahar, Staff Sergeant Jamie Chen. I swore I'd never pick up a rifle again, that I was done being responsible for taking human life. Today I broke that promise because the alternative was watching 20 soldiers die when I had the skills to prevent it. I still don't know if I made the right choice. A younger ranger, Private David Thompson with both arms in casts, spoke up from his bed. Ma'am, my wife is 5 months pregnant. Because of you, I'm going to meet my daughter. Whatever moral struggle you're having, please remember that. Around the room, other rangers nodded, some with tears in their eyes. Elena felt something crack in the armor she'd built around herself, the wall between the weapon she'd been and the person she was trying to become. Your daughter deserves to have a father, Private. All of you deserve to go home. I'm glad I could help make that possible, even if it meant becoming someone I'd hoped to leave behind. After leaving the medical facility, Elena walked to the communications building and requested a private line. It took 20 minutes to establish the secure connection to Virginia, to the modest house where Jamie's widow Michelle raised their daughter alone. When Lily Chen answered, her voice was uncertain, 14 years old now, barely remembering the father who died when she was 10. Lily, this is Elena, your dad's friend from the army. I need to tell you something about today, about a promise I made to him and a promise I just broke. Because you're old enough now to understand that sometimes keeping our word to the dead means honoring why they loved us, not just what we said we'd do. Lily listened as Elena explained the ambush, the impossible choice, the 20 rangers who lived because she'd picked up a rifle despite her promise to never kill again. When Elena finished, there was a long silence on the line before Lily spoke, her voice surprisingly steady. My mom told me what happened to Dad, that he died while you were saving people. She said he always told her you were the best he'd ever seen, that you carried the weight of every shot because you understood what it meant. Elena closed her eyes, tears finally breaking through. I tried to put down that weight, Lily. I tried so hard to be someone else. But you're not someone else, Lily said with the clarity only teenagers possess. You're the person my dad trusted with his life. The person who kept fighting even when he was dying because that's what the mission required. He wouldn't want you to hate yourself for being good at keeping people alive, even if the method is killing bad guys. That's what Mum says he believed, that your gift wasn't death, it was protecting people. Elena wiped her eyes, hearing Jamie's philosophy in his daughter's words. Your father was a better person than I'll ever be, Lily, but thank you for reminding me why he chose to do this work, why we both did. Not because we loved killing, but because we loved the people we kept safe. 2 days later, Colonel Morrison called Elena back to her office. This time, Major Hayes was present, along with a serious-looking lieutenant colonel from Division Intelligence. Morrison spoke formally. Captain Vasquez, after reviewing your actions and the tactical situation, I'm issuing a formal apology. When you requested that rifle, you were acting on superior combat awareness while I was operating on prejudice about your current assignment. You identified a crisis, possessed unique skills to address it, and acted decisively when hesitation would have cost American lives. I was wrong to question your judgment, and I apologize. Elena stood straighter, surprised. Ma'am, you were following proper protocols for Morrison cut her off. I was being a narrow-minded ass, Captain. Accept the apology. The intelligence lieutenant colonel stepped forward. Captain Vasquez, we've been monitoring Taliban communications since the engagement. The bounty on you has actually created an operational advantage. They're so focused on identifying the ghost shooter that they're exposing their intelligence networks. We've rolled up 3 informant cells in the past 48 hours. He smiled grimly. Your actions saved Bravo Company and inadvertently compromised enemy intelligence operations. Division is recommending you for the Silver Star, and Special Operations Command has requested your transfer for advanced marksmanship training cadre. Elena felt the weight of expectation settling on her shoulders again. The familiar pressure to be the weapon everyone needed her to be. Sir, I appreciate the recognition, but I need to decline the transfer. Morrison raised an eyebrow. You're refusing, Sosie? Elena nodded slowly, finally understanding what Jamie had tried to teach her before he died. Ma'am, I'm not refusing to use my skills when they're needed. I proved I'll step forward in a crisis, that I can't ignore a situation where I'm uniquely qualified to save lives. But I also can't be solely defined by my ability to kill efficiently. I'm requesting to remain in logistics, with the understanding that in combat emergencies, I'm available as a marksmanship asset. I'll be the ghost shooter when rangers need saving, and I'll be the supply officer who ensures they have ammunition to fight with. Both roles matter, both are service, and maybe I can finally be both without hating myself for either. Morrison studied her for a long moment, then smiled. Request approved, Captain. Welcome to being a complete soldier instead of just a weapon.
ওই বিশাল বিশাল হাট তুই থাকলে জমজমাট তোর লাথি গুতাও খায় যত নবাব জাদা লাট ওই বিশাল বিশাল